You're listening to the We Are Libertarians Podcast Network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
Hey loves, Haley Steinfeld here. Let's be real. When I'm on the red carpet, everyone wants to know whose dress I'm wearing. But here's the thing. We're so focused on those details, we're missing something that's actually way more important. Breast health. It's wild. Breasts get so much attention, but they're still so ignored when it matters most. Don't know what I'm talking about? Tune in on February 9th and visit yourattentionplease.com. That's yourattentionplease.com. See you then.
Oh, it's such a clutch off-season pickup, Dave.
I was worried we'd bring back the same team.
I meant those blackout motorized shades.
Blinds.com made it crazy affordable to replace our old blinds.
Hard to install?
No, it's easy. I installed these and then got some for my mom. She talked to a design consultant for free and scheduled a professional measure and install.
Hall of Fame son.
They're the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings in the world.
Blinds.com is the GOAT.
Shop Blinds.com right now and get up to 45% off select styles. Rules and restrictions may apply.
All right, let's get back to some boring subjects.
Understand the risk to our country.
Freedom brings people together.
You're listening to the We Are Libertarians Network. Learn more at wearelibertarians.com.
Welcome to We Are Libertarians. My name is Chris Spangle. It is so nice to see you tonight. Or hear me. You hear me.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Chris.
Hi, Gault. We're going to talk about Game of Thrones and what does power mean, and talk a little bit about political power and where it's derived from, and a whole lot of nerd talk about Game of Thrones. So, not going to lie, it's not relevant to you if you don't know the show, haven't caught up on the show. It's
Spoilers ahead.
Not for you, so be aware. So we'll be back right after this.
Warning, this show is for adults, produced by semi-adults. So the language is sometimes strong and offensive.
I don't know what I said.
Welcome to We Are Libertarians, where our goal is to help you sound smarter while talking to your friends. We examine current events from a libertarian perspective while treating modern politics with all of the irreverence it deserves.
There has been lie after lie.
We toss out the screaming heads, put people before political parties, and give context to the news to make you think. Now, here's our host, a 15-year veteran of politics and media, Chris Spangle.
All right, welcome back. This is Chris Spangle with the music incredibly loud. Ironically, the one person in the room without headphones is my coworker on radio.
What's up?
Jess Alsman, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
It's so nice to see your face. Saw you yesterday. I was like, I can't have a Game of Thrones episode without the resident nerd at the day job.
I would have been bitter.
You would have been mad at me.
Yeah.
And I share an office with you, so I'm not taking any chances.
Yeah.
Also, here is one of the OGs from episode 1 through 39-ish.
Gault.
Chris Gault.
I'm here.
Chris Gault is here. He is feisty as ever. He's going to piss you off. He's where he and I are probably going to Android, iPhone argue. You know, maybe some of that later in the show.
Let's do it.
Wait, am I going to have to fight him?
Yes, please. That is Todd Singer.
That would make it more interesting and blow the show up.
Todd Singer. Todd, I don't know. Have you ever been on the show?
I have not. Although
Okay.
I have done a podcast in this apartment before.
You have, yeah.
Sorry, in the studio before.
Do you still do that podcast?
No, it's defunct. It's on hiatus.
Okay, well that means it's never coming back.
It's never coming back.
I have one of those.
Yeah, never not. What is
Nearly
it?
total nonsense.
Nearly total
with
nonsense.
Christopher Peppers.
Yeah, who's in God knows where.
We did a couple episodes. It was pretty good.
You got a defunct podcast too, Jess?
Well, we tried.
Yep.
We tried.
Right.
Yeah.
So everybody's got a defunct podcast. Mine's the Chris Spangle Show, and some would say we are libertarians, to be quite honest with you, depending on who you talk to. Todd Singer is the man who hired me at the Libertarian Party of Indiana and completely changed the trajectory of my life. It was the wisest decision you've ever made, isn't it?
It was. It was made at
More so than your wife. Go ahead, say it.
Cracker Barrel in Plainfield. It's the best hire I've ever made, personally.
Yeah, that's very kind. I do have a gun to his head. I made him say that. No, Todd was my boss for 6 months, 9 months?
Something like that. Yeah, my second kid came around, and I decided, hey, it's time to let somebody else. When Sam said, hey, I think I could do that. Like, hey, that sounds great to me. Sam's good people.
Sam Goldstein, currently on the LNC. He was my boss for the rest of my time at the Libertarian Party of Indiana. Great guy. you wouldn't say that if you know Sam, great guy. If you don't know Sam, total asshole. Right?
So true.
Right. So and so last year, or 2016, actually, it's 2019. When Sam was in all this brouhaha of, they wouldn't let Ron Paul speak at the convention. Sam Goldstein wouldn't let him. Like, Sam hates a lot of people, but he's a very fair man. You're just making things up, Joshua Smith, and we know that he makes things up. So, So Todd, very, very good friend of mine, longtime listener and supporter of the show, Patreon supporter, and we're very happy to have you here. So thank you for A, being a Patreon supporter.
Welcome.
And B, do I owe you a poster?
I don't know.
All right. Well, there's probably a few of you that I do. I apologize. I hired someone to do the posters, and then they lost them. So we're reordering those.
My wife doesn't let me hang up posters. It's quite all right.
That's a big fail.
It is.
Did you demote her?
Yes.
Spanker?
I fired her.
Oh.
She now works in New York City.
Wow.
She's a Democrat.
That's a downgrade.
Wow. No. It was not her fault.
So she left you. It was a breakup.
It was. No, it wasn't a breakup. We never had romantic relations.
A podcast breakup.
Yeah, speaking of that, last time Alsman was here, I lost 2 co-hosts.
I witnessed the beginning of the end, and I didn't realize it. I'm sorry. What would I have done, though? Said, hey, you guys, this isn't a good idea.
Yeah, it's okay.
Or it's a great idea. I don't know.
It's a great idea.
I'm not involved.
They're still happily together. We're
great.
happy for them. Yeah, great idea.
They made a great choice to pursue other things. Let's change the subject. Game of Thrones.
Just as we both work for the Bob and Tom show, which we normally don't talk about Game of Thrones, or we don't talk about my day job, but it's a comedy radio show. She's the resident geek on the show. She does a series. You should go subscribe to the YouTube channel, Bob and Tom Show. You can see every Friday. She is in the Week in Review. I produce it along with our friend Gray Singer. And she does a series called Overthinking with Jess Alsman. We've only done 2. We've been meaning to do more, but she overthinks it.
I'm too busy overthinking them.
Right.
I've got a lot to do, though. A lot of them are just lined up, ready to roll out. So get ready, Spangle.
What's on the top 3, would you say?
Ooh, overthinking your Indy 500 fashion.
Okay.
Ooh. That only works for this week, though, with the race.
We'll never get it. We'll never get it done in time.
Okay. Overthinking your menstrual cycle for men. Not to ever say, guys are like, what are you on your period? Worst thing you can say to a girl. So it's basically overthinking that altogether and explaining what you should do instead, like the signs to look for.
I apologize for saying that to you last week.
Yeah.
It's possible that...
Was I the inspiration for that particular one?
A lot of guys in that building are.
It's possible I might know someone who puts his wife's cycle on his personal calendar just as a reminder.
Just to hide.
You know what, though? It's okay
Is that
as
why you're
long
here?
as they don't say it.
No, it's not.
You just can't say it like, it's a full moon. I know what that is. This is the 28 days
It's
or
the
29 days. Or...
Yeah, and we're here to educate men.
Yes.
I will say it jokingly, but it's demeaning. That's why guys will say you're just hormonal because you're not a girl. It's why is it annoying to women?
Because it's just an excuse for them to say, no matter what you say right now, you're not being rational, so I don't have to listen.
Right.
I don't care if I don't know how to load the dishwasher. You're just irrational right now.
Right.
Because your uterus is shedding its lining.
It's them copping out.
Right.
Right. It's sort of like calling someone a crazy bee. It's like, you're just crazy. It's like sort of the same. It hits the same note. Would you say? Right.
And usually I am on.
That.
Yeah.
I've
this week.
I was joking with her. Because
was it funny? Did she laugh?
I don't know. Did you?
I think I was like, no, it's PMDD. You want to talk about it? And that's a whole other thing besides PMS.
Yeah, I've had 6 jobs, and they all make you take sexual harassment training.
We had to
and
take
it's
it.
literally.
Wait a minute, are you
clearly in there
sure?
says.
If it's 6 different places I'm having you do sexual harassment training, I don't know if you can make that connection for sure.
No, Jess and I share an office, and most of the day is her just yelling in my direction. Not at me, just yelling. I mean,
or talking, and then I'm like, are you listening? Because he'll have his headphones on.
My job is audio and video editing, and if I don't have my headphones on, then I'm never going to get anything done.
So you're never really listening. You're always just nodding your head,
and
yes.
It's not Jess.
You're right. Yes.
Yep.
And Jess is the least of the problems. I mean, you vouch for me. My office is Grand Central Station where we work.
It is. People seem to just migrate there naturally.
Right. Because you and I are there. We're the fun people that work there. Everybody else is boring. And that's not true.
We're the only ones here, so we can say it's true.
Right, exactly.
It's not true.
And so everybody kind of ends up in my office, and literally, like, from the time I get in there between 9 or 10 until the time I leave, it's just one person after another. And I just looked at my boss today, and I go, I got some thinking that I got to do. I might not come in this week. And he goes, I totally get it. Because you have a hideaway office somewhere else. He has a hideaway office somewhere else. It's like, I don't know, it's a very social workplace, like any radio station is. And, you know, it's just sort of, at a certain point, I gotta get stuff done. I'm very efficient, am I not?
You are. It's
so you
amazing.
need a hideaway office.
I do, yeah.
So?
Well, this is kind of my hideaway office, yeah.
But they let you come home and work from home?
Yeah.
Oh,
we
nice.
have like the best bosses in the world. And I'm not just saying that because we're on tape. I mean, would you agree with me?
Yeah, if you're getting your job done, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
And you can do it anywhere, kind of.
Yeah.
Most of the time. So,
Yeah, a lot of my production I have to do at work, but the emails I can answer from the sunny back porch.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Or
so
on the
it's-
beach in Florida.
Yeah, it's very nice. But yeah, I have a lot of projects going, and I got a lot that I got to get done in the day, and so I apologize if I ever ignored you, Jess.
no, it makes me mad when you're extremely efficient, knocking things off your to-do list. I'm like, that's not fair. I'm not knocking things off. Pay attention to me.
Sorry. I didn't mean to be focused.
No, it's okay.
I'm the only focused person that has ever worked in the radio industry. It's really annoying to everybody, I think.
It's beneficial. If you ignore me, I eventually just go away. I'm like a cat.
Right. She does. And then I feel bad because I realized why she's leaving. I ignored her, and then I'm like, "Oh, Jess, come back. I'm so sorry."
I'm like, no, I got the hint, and you're right. You were absolutely right. I'm going to go do my job now.
I try not to ignore you. Sometimes I get into the zone, and then I can't get out of it.
That's okay. I turn to you for politics, though.
That's right.
So I can be a little dangerous talking
That's right.
with the friends and family.
That's right. That's what we do here. Gault.
Dangerous Speak. That's my middle name.
Yeah, Gault. Here's the funny thing about this show.
What's that?
The progenitor of Gault leaving was the fact that we would not let him talk about fluoride in the water and conspiracy theories in 2012. So this program started March 8th, 2012. That was when the first episode dropped. The first one was recorded late February because I didn't hit record.
Yeah,
It got
we
messed
had to
up.
do the first episode twice.
Yeah, and but if you go back and you listen to it, it's I think us talking about maybe Ron Paul versus Gary Johnson or something. I don't know. It started in early 2012 during the 2012 election. So we're about to do our third election cycle, which is crazy. Wow. And back in 2012, Todd, you didn't talk about conspiracy theories, especially if you were a libertarian.
Well, not around here. I didn't talk much about that. I was, being in Indiana, I was trying to be, straight-laced and talk about all of the fiscal aspects of things. And even if it was like marijuana, like, okay, well, let's frame that as a fiscal issue. How much money that we're spending on incarcerating and investigating and such and such.
Yeah, you hired me in 2008, October 2008, and it was almost a no pot discussion rule. I mean, we didn't talk about marijuana because a lot of that time period for libertarians was we don't want to be seen as crazy. We've gone through 35, 40 years of the guy in the Hawaiian shirt trying to be outrageous on the televised debate talking about marijuana, and it was such a punchline of pot and libertarians, but lo and behold, you look 10 years later and it's damn near legalized everywhere. And now he didn't talk about conspiracies because it was completely taboo. You would immediately get run out of the rails as a crazy person. And we now have a conspiracy theorist as a president. And the media is a conspiracy theorist about the president.
And you've apologized to that.
I actually have, yeah, because while I don't believe in conspiracy theories, I do believe that some older conspiracy theories like JFK and some of that stuff, I think that the Dulles brothers were the two most evil men to live, and so was LBJ. But like 9/11 truth, fluoride in the water, I'm sorry, I'm not down with all that stuff, but
I think there actually is fluoride in the water.
Oh, you don't understand the benefits of spring water?
No, I understand.
Fresh spring water?
I understand having good teeth, right.
Fresh spring water does not have fluoride in it.
Let's not beat this dead horse. Creighton is not here to punch you.
Which was my point. You have apologized for it.
But
I've still yet to hear from Creighton.
Creighton, you'll never get an apology from. First of all, Creighton has a big boy job in New York City with a very reputable firm.
And still doesn't talk about it.
And still he will never be back on the show because I just thought about it the other day. I go, God, this show has been on so long that we now have people with great jobs in high places. And 20 years from now, I'll be like, I'm destitute. Can you hire me, Creighton? Remember me? No.
Can I clean your house?
Right. I know how to do toilets. But I think that the term conspiracy theorist, which is sort of what you were trying to say, is just a blanket term it's a propaganda term. It's like far right.
Yep.
It's anytime you see the media talking about far right commentator and then they mention Ben Shapiro and you're like, the dude couldn't be more mainstream conservative, down the road, fair to the left. You know, it's like it's a propagandist term, and so you can just label anybody a conspiracy theorist, and the point of the term is that this person is not fit to be in society, therefore it doesn't matter what happens to them.
And none of his other political opinions matter.
Right. It doesn't matter that Alex Jones, you've never seen 1 second, and I'm not defending on Alex Jones on this, but I am defending the charge against the media, okay? Right. Because if Alex Jones had ever said, I want you to show up at those parents' house and terrorize them, you would see that everywhere all the time. Have you ever, think about this, America, have you ever seen Alex Jones on video, which he broadcast every minute of his video free across the world, have you ever seen 1 second of him talking about Sandy Hook? Or saying go terrorize parents? No, you haven't, but you've heard he said some stuff about Sandy Hook, and he's a conspiracy theorist, and he denies that this happened. And it's sort of the same has happened with Gavin McInnes. Gavin McInnes, he started something called the Proud Boys, which was mostly what he calls a men's club, and it basically was just like a bunch of dudes getting together, forming like our Liberty and Chills, and it was based around chauvinism and Western culture, which basically just means we're going to just be a bunch of misogynistic dudes. And they decided to start fighting back against Antifa, who was shutting down conservative speakers, and then all of a sudden they're a terrorist organization, and he's a leader of a terrorist organization, and you just go, how many times have you ever listened to Gavin McInnes? But he's a leader of a terrorist cell. He's racist. He's all these different terms that you just use to move somebody out of out of public opinion, because you don't want to deal with what they say. And then Alex Jones gets banned from Facebook for having Gavin McInnes on his show off of Facebook. So he gets banned from Facebook for something he didn't do on the platform, and then if you bitch about it on the platform, you get banned. So the slippery slope, I'd like to point out, hey, remember when somebody 2.5 years ago, 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago at the least, was saying, this is a dangerous precedent. You don't want them going down this road because it's only going to get worse. We're at worse, and it's only going to get worse over time. You think next year they're going to just, you know what, free speech is good. We've changed our mind.
That's exactly why I wanted us to talk about it. I wanted us to look past the propaganda and just look at the issues for a second and not have to polarize things so much and label things.
Yeah.
Even the term...
I was just woke back then in 2012, huh?
you hear the term deep state now in mainstream media pretty regularly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was something in 2008 or whatever.
Right.
If you said that term, you're just completely written off.
Right. Totally. So it's funny to look back in the beginning. You'll go listen to the first 5 episodes and just kind of think about how much further down certain rabbit holes we are, how much, like the good thing about We Are Libertarians, you can go back and watch the sands of time. You go back and listen to all the episodes.
The show's not only helped the audience, it's helped you too.
Right.
You've grown.
I have grown. I started this show married. I'm no longer married. I started this show with you, and you're all I've got left.
I'm still here.
We're going to pause now for a few minutes.
I got to go.
Brief intermission.
Are you tired of banging your head against the proverbial wall of politics and getting nowhere toward actually making your life more free? Are you tired of interview podcasts that have the same guests as every other libertarian interview podcast out there? Are you tired of hearing the same news stories that you can hear on the mainstream media? Then you need to listen to The Lava Flow, where we don't do politics and we don't do the major stories that exist only to divide you. We talk about news that affects you and your freedom, and we work to find solutions that can actually help you to be more free. Check us out at thelavaflow.com.
The reason we are gathered here today is to talk about Game of Thrones, and we're going to have some nerd talk around it. I'm not going to be able to stop these three. The person who was here earlier goes, I just, they all seem to know each other, and like I just don't know anybody. And I go, they've never met. They're just really geeking out over Game of Thrones.
No, I think she's like, oh, I thought you were going to talk about politics. You're going to geek out of Game of Thrones. See ya.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Jess, you were like.
This episode is brought to you by the 2025 Lincoln Aviator SUV. The 2025 Lincoln Aviator nails that feeling of next-level confidence. The updated grille and sleek lights, total head turners. Under the hood, a refined twin-turbo V6 powers you through with authority. Inside, pure comfort. Plush 3-row seating, custom climate control, available massage seats keep you ready to tackle whatever's next. Explore more at Lincoln.com. Some models, trims, and features may not be available or may be subject to change. Check with your local retailer for current information. Lincoln and Aviator are trademarks of Ford or its affiliates.
At the UPS Store, we know things can get busy this upcoming holiday. You can count on us to be open and ready to help with any packing and shipping or anything else you might need.
Is there anything you can't do?
Actually, I don't have a good singing voice. The UPS... Nope. But our certified packing experts can pack and ship just about anything.
At least that's good.
The UPS Store. Be unstoppable. Most locations are independently owned. Product, services, pricing, and hours of operation may vary. See Center for details. Come in today to get your holiday goodies there on time.
This episode is brought to you by Abercrombie. Build your fits of the day with Abercrombie's newest denim drop. Here's where to start. Abercrombie's 90s straight jean goes with any shirt from tees to sweater polos. Super versatile. Their loose and baggy jeans are more trend forward, so you can grab those and go out with your friends. Abercrombie's denim fits come in a range of washes. Build your looks around Abercrombie denim. Shop online or in-store.
Please don't invite me if you're going to talk about politics. I just want to talk about dragons.
No, when I said I was coming on here, my boyfriend was like, you're going to talk politics? I go, Lord, no. We're talking Game of Thrones. He goes, okay, that makes more sense.
All right, so let's start with our general impressions of this episode. Let's just say the whole story arc and the last episode specifically. I'm not going to give you a spoiler alert because if you're stupid enough to start listening to a podcast that's got Game of Thrones in the title 2 days after the finale, then you know what you're going to get. So you don't get a spoiler alert. That's dumb.
I think
Grow
that
up.
was actually a spoiler alert than you just gave.
It's called broadcasting. Look it up, Jess.
Sorry, sorry dear leader.
Thank you.
Wow, she's down with the terms.
Yes, she's been around.
I can't escape him talking about how he's the leader and wall this, wall that.
Yep.
No,
I
I'm in.
Roam around the office talking about libertarianism. I'm the most popular guy there.
He's spreading joy and wisdom.
When I walk down the hall, doors shut. Oh, God. How many vaccinations did he have? All right, so let's...
Not enough.
Right. So let's talk about just what did you think of the ending of the show and the story arc as a whole? Let's start with Todd Singer.
Yeah, I wasn't thrilled. Like, this is not a hot take. A lot of people think that the last 2 seasons feel rushed. I thought they could have done a lot more fleshing out. And in the last episode, we got the big scene with Dany and Aegon, John.
That's another thing. Normally, we stop and try to catch the newbies up. We're just gonna be full nerd.
Yeah,
We're not,
there you go.
But like nobody knows who Aegon is, but Jon Snow it up if you can, just so those who are tangentially kind of following it.
Understood. So we get that scene, and then they still have whatever 40 minutes left of airtime, but that really wasn't enough to me. Didn't love the ending. Would have probably preferred something different, but there were some good parts too. And I talked about pre-show how I liked how, Bronn is now master of coin, whereas Peter Baelish was master of coin, and Peter Baelish got his information through the brothels, so he ran the brothels. And of course, Bronn, his first priority is let's rebuild the brothels.
Right.
Different reason for wanting to do that, but still, that was, I think, a nice scene.
Right. Jessica?
The last episode, like I think most people were complaining, the whole season was just so rushed.
Yeah.
Because they could have made that at least a season or two alone. The last episode should have been 2 or 3 episodes. And I think had it been spaced out like, the past seasons, I would have been like, this is great. I didn't see where it was going. But instead of having like witty dialogue and like suspense, it was like, this happened, next scene, this happens, next scene. Everything was just like back to back.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, crap. But with where they went with it, I mean, I was okay with that. At first, I'm like, really? Can I say literally who gets the throne? Like,
yes.
Bran ends up being on the Iron Throne at the end. And like, Bran
the Broken.
I wanted Jon Snow or
Right.
Daenerys, one of those two. But then with Dany
Not
turning
a
Mad Queen, it was
not
like,
a secondary character who wasn't even in one of the seasons.
but silly me, because
Right.
if you thought this was a happy ending, you've been mistaken, a la Ramsay Bolton. So I was okay with it being Bran for the reasoning that Tyrion gives. But Jon Snow just getting sent back to the north, I'm like, that's cool. I mean, he belongs up there. He can hang out with the wildling women and
Right.
get away from the drama since, Dany's gone. But overall, I love the show. The last season was just rushed so much. It was like,
Yeah.
so as a fan, I guess it's easy to complain because you want more.
Do we have any idea why this season was so rushed?
I don't know.
Is it an artistic choice?
We
or?
think the showrunners, Benioff and Weiss, were ready to be done. What I've heard is that HBO gave them license to keep going and gave them the budget, but they had decided that they were ready to move on.
Yeah, I think they're ready to work on the new Star Wars.
new Star
They're probably
Wars.
writing a storyline instead of Game of Thrones. And
Right.
Ran out of...
The good news is, there's no possible issue with upsetting Star Wars fans if they go in the wrong direction.
Right. Well, and that's it
they're
really
already
felt to me watching this season, especially this last episode, like C+ homework. You were, you can kind of tell when somebody's just not focused on something, and it really felt like they just didn't pay attention to the details. And there's little things like in one of the biggest budget shows of all time, like coffee cups and water bottles in the scenes, like that. Those little attention to detail things, you just sort of go, I don't get why this was so. Why did they mess this part of it up so bad?
Like senioritis in the back end.
Yes.
But the acting was phenomenal.
Yeah.
All the characters I thought did so great. Oh, kitty cat, hello.
If Peter Dinklage doesn't win Best Actor in something, I will be amazed. I mean, I thought the last 3 episodes have been his best acting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Okay, but I have a problem with his ending too.
Yeah.
So I think George R.R. Martin, the author of the books, is on record as saying that he identifies with Tyrion the most of all the characters.
Right.
And the ending to me seemed almost like a Mary Sue type thing. Like, I'm going to write a happy ending for my character, even though it's hard to see how he would have been in that position, with the other dynamics that were in play.
Yeah. Well, I'll get to Tyrion in my wrap up because I don't totally agree. For those of you who don't know, Tyrion, the man short of stature, ends up being the hand of the king. Yes, go ahead, Jessica.
Did you say that? I love your cat.
Mittens.
Did you say that George R. R. Martin, he's all about, being circular and bringing everything back? And so,
That was Chris.
I did, yeah.
Said that.
I did.
One
It
of
was
the
an
Chris's said
It was
that.
an article that I read. Yeah.
So then maybe that's like just another one of those characters. Let's bring him back to where they kind of started because he's so good at the game itself, being involved, whether he wants to continue doing it. It's like, no, you have to do this. This is your destiny.
And just like Jamie.
Well, I mean, you really look at it, and Tyrion ended up positioning himself to be the de facto ruler of the kingdom. I mean, he put in position to be the king, the weakest person in the game, the person with the least interest in it, who shows up to his first council meeting and just kind of shrugs, and then like, I'm going to go smoke weed now, and like backs away, and then
You underestimate Bran, sir. He's the mastermind behind the entire story.
We'll get to you in a moment, but that was the moment when I was like, this is brilliant, because doesn't matter what choice Jon Snow ever made, the wheel was going to continue. Power was going to be exercised in the same way it's always been exercised. A Tyrion who's the most clever will position himself to be in power and then bring his friends along. So what was your impressions, Chris Gault? It's your turn.
So it sounds like we have between the three of you.
Just hold on. Just starting out smug. You breathe and it's smug. Go ahead.
Between the three of you, it sounds like there's a consensus that you would all rewrite it in your own way, and that's fine.
This episode was kind of like, I'd say the last season, but the ending as a whole was like coming on SSRIs, on antidepressants. It's still nice, but it's not great. That's how I'd put it. It's just sort of meh.
And that's why I absolutely love the ending.
Of course.
Is because everyone here doesn't like it. Or doesn't like aspects of it, at least. And I think that that's a great storytelling, to have characters not do what they would normally do in a fairy tale type world like that. Like Jamie's fall was probably my favorite part, and which when I'm reading it seems like that's most people's least favorite part.
Jamie basically going back to Cersei and dying.
Because that's what his whole story was. He only ever loved one person in his whole life.
Right.
And when he was with Brienne, you could see it in his face the whole time he was there that it wasn't the same for him. It wasn't like his true love, his sister. But it is what it is. But nice. I loved that he fell back to his addiction and it was real. It was a real moment for a character that I don't feel like you get in very many shows. It was almost like kind of like Walter White in Breaking Bad's a good character that you see break, you know.
I agree with you about Jamie. I agree that he's the most realistic person because at the end of the day, we are all like people, no matter how hard they try to change their spots, and no matter how hard they try to be noble and do the right thing, like you always eventually kind of fall back into some of those worst patterns and then have to keep fighting those demons.
Yeah.
I think he was a very conflicted character, and I think that he had a really good story arc.
Yeah, and then with Tyrion saving his life, you know, in the camp, I think that was a really great moment for Tyrion because he left there and he knew that was the end of his life. Like he gave up his life for his brother.
Yeah,
and eventually that would come back to him, and that's why when they showed him in the rubble, like someone in my viewing party said, "Oh, why are they showing that?" And I was like, yeah, but they're showing this for Tyrion.
Maybe they're top 5 characters, like.
Well, yeah, and on-screen death, I guess, because they kind of flashed away. And you don't want that as a loose end, you know,
right.
Thinking Cersei's still alive somewhere in the theory boards.
Right.
Which it was, so good call that they showed that.
Yeah.
But you said Jamie never loved any other person, but I think it's pretty clear he loved Tyrion. I mean, he several times put himself on the line for his brother.
Yeah.
You know, convinced Tywin to not execute him.
Yeah.
He helped him escape in other places. Like,
you're right.
And of course, Tyrion references that. Like, hey, I wouldn't even be.
I think that scene. I think that
you.
Scene of Tyrion saying goodbye to Jamie was one of the best scenes in the whole show. I thought it was super touching and well acted by Peter Dinklage.
And I think there were a lot of those moments in the season that I think people will start to realize when we all rewatch it again, like we have the first 5 or 6 seasons. We've all watched it like 5 or 6 times, I'm sure. And once we watch this one a few more times, we'll start to like some of those moments a little bit more and start to understand some of those holes. Because I don't know about you guys, but like if it was season 6 right now and I went back for a rewatch, there are things in those seasons that I would notice that I did not notice. So every single rewatch, I would learn more things and connections with those characters.
Yeah.
And that will happen in this new season. It's
like,
the exact
for example,
same.
Daenerys at one point tells Varys flat out, "I will burn you alive if you betray me."
Well, wasn't there a dream sequence of her walking into the throne room in snow?
Yep.
She's in the house of the Undying.
Mm-hmm, with the warlock.
And at
she
first,
burns them with the little
it's
baby
like,
dragons.
Is it snow? And then you're like, oh no, it's ash. But then it really did. They did bring winter to King's Landing, so I guess it was snow. But she never touched it.
It was kind of both,
right.
snow
so
and
as
ash.
soon as she gets close to the throne, and then she ends up going to what looks like north of the wall, and she sees Khal Drogo and her baby.
Right.
They didn't make it, but apparently that's her going into the afterlife to join them.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the sun rising in the east, setting in the west. Or what was it? No, sun rises in the west. and sets in the east?
Mhm.
How does the sun actually do it? It's the opposite of how the real sun
Starts
does it.
in the east and ends in the west.
This is
Backwards.
easy
It's
to remember.
backwards
You
there.
just watched the great '80s movie, The Muppet movie, and the song says, "Hey, I've never seen the sun come out in the west." And that's how you remember. You may be too young for that movie.
Yeah, I know.
Just get a map.
Sorry, just look out my window.
The map. How does the map help with the
Yeah,
sunset?
but besides Jamie and Tyrion, I really liked all the Starks endings. All three of them. They're all four of them. They're all kings and queens in their own regards. They all went in their own ways. They all get to live lives that they chose. Sansa wanted to be queen since day one.
Mm-hmm.
That's what all she was saying the whole time. And Arya has said earlier in the series that she wanted to sail west and explore. And Bran didn't vocalize what he wanted, but he wanted to be king, or he knew that he was going to be king, at least, as he said in that last episode.
Knowing and wanting are two different things. Why do you think he wanted it? Is there anything that leads you or any of you to believe that he wanted to be king, or he was just
he said that he does not want.
He just
it's
accepts.
just a necessary thing,
Right.
Mhm. And then Jon is also the king beyond the wall. So I think they all got their great endings. That's the only place Jon really belonged, was when he was north of the wall with Ygritte, which was some of my favorite times.
When
in
they were
Thrones.
walking out, I really wanted to see a White Walker. I was really hoping I'd love that suspense of that's what I thought was going to happen as they're walking, kind of all the parading north, and they'd see the Night King or a White Walker. I was like, oh, please,
we
please.
missed one.
So you want more White Walkers?
I just a continuation.
That's
of
what they're going to do.
everything. Yeah.
The new series they're going to do is called The Long Night.
Oh, is it?
Mm-hmm. And it's the prequel for the original the White Walkers came.
What are the spinoffs?
That's the one they're going to do.
Okay,
Right.
just that one.
I mean, no.
Children of the Forest,
George R. R. Martin is committed to up to 5, to helping write up to 5.
He's laughing the whole time.
5
Y'all
more.
help you with
5
5
spin-off
I just need to
series.
get one book out that's been waiting
5
10
new
years.
series,
Yeah.
spin-off series.
Not for nothing, but as a man of larger carriage, can we get you to finish the book series before you know?
Yeah, I know, that's
right.
it.
Let's hit the treadmill.
He's
and eat a
cashing
salad.
in
I don't think he'll write another book
because
As he hasn't finished. He's got
Winds
like
of
what?
Winter is just out there chilling, right?
Right. He's got
Huh.
what? 2 more to finish.
well, he was like, some people didn't like the ending. I might just blame it on D&D and not put out my books so they don't hate me.
Right. D&D being the showrunners,
Right,
the
sorry.
guys that basically were in charge, like the David Chase, the who's the Sopranos guy, or Dick Wolf for Law and Order.
Right.
So my impressions, knowing that now that I know that they're going to do spinoffs, things make sense. Like you're going to send Jon north, you're going to send Arya out west, to find new lands, and she's a colonialist. That stuff makes sense if you're doing spinoffs, but from a classic story point, like, if you ever read The Hero's Journey, I think it's The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell, where basically the general story arc, it's very influential on George Lucas and Star Wars. You take somebody who's in a low rank, somebody who's kind of poor or young or an upstart, they feel an injustice in the world. They meet a guide who helps them kind of discover their true power, and then the hero defeats the evil empire with the help of the guide, and there's trials and tribulations along the way, and usually a romantic interest. And that's the classic storytelling formula that pretty much everything Joseph Campbell just kind of identified through all of mythology and history and all of our literature, like these main themes. There's another guy, the 7 basic plots, where he identifies the 7 basic plots that all stories kind of follow. And so there's some stuff in this where there's discord between classic storytelling and the way that this wrapped up. You have Jon Snow, who is resurrected, who is the main character of the story, who is raised from the dead. He defeats at the Battle of the Bastards. He has all these huge moments. And then he just becomes sort of this silent, neutered person in the last episode, especially.
Whoa. But that's after he saves potentially millions of people.
Mm-hmm.
the entire world, the known world.
Maybe. So, yes, there is that scene, but at the end
Tyrion,
of
he at least saves Tyrion.
he's going, but she's my queen. You just saw her nuke an entire town of 1 million people. She's still your queen. You should be you should be
loved her.
reacting like if you're a man of honor, you'd go like Ned Stark. You'd go the way of Tyrion and Varys, and you'd stop her, which he ultimately did. But he had conflict over it. It was just sort of
Love is the death of duty.
But that whole thing was just sort of crammed. It was just odd, and it didn't
Amen
fit
said
right.
that.
Like, did
Amen
it feel
said that.
rushed?
Not just rushed, but just like
How many times can you guys say rushed in this
just
podcast?
bad storytelling.
I'm from Rushville.
Bad
Huh?
storytelling because it subverted your expectations. It was
No,
bad.
because it's bad storytelling.
What was bad about it? What part of the story was bad?
That particular,
besides that you disagreed with the outcome.
the fact that the whole show is about the North,
Daenerys Targaryen?
the Northmen specifically.
Oh, it's about the Northmen.
and the start. Would you shut up? Thank you.
Oh no.
This
Am I
story-
witnessing
this
the
story
beginning
is
of the
just-
end here?
This story is much larger than one character or one town.
But
or
when
one
you're
area.
talking about the Stark's story arc, you're talking about men who just do the right thing no matter the cost, and then they're men of honor, and then you get to the last episode and he completely betrays that by waffling on whether or not he should stop Daenerys Targaryen, we just witnessed one of the great tyrannical scenes of all of television history. Like it's like watching.
And you didn't want any
Nuremberg.
conflict in his mind about to stab the woman that he loved. You didn't want any conflict
Because
there?
he knew he had to kill her. The only way to stop her would be to kill her.
Yeah. Right.
And he was the only one that could, and that's what sucked.
That's
as opposed to just
but
having
you
a
wouldn't have that-
conversation
you
with
wouldn't
her.
have that
guys,
conflict?
do you guys, from the acting, from the storytelling, do you guys, there are two things that are really missing around Daenerys and Jon in this season in my mind. First is the deterioration of Daenerys into a madman. The most that we really get are some like weird, pensive, it looked like she had diarrhea that she was holding in her face and made this angry face, and then she just became crazy. There was never any like dialogue around her being crazy. It was just weird faces. And then second was the love interest. It's like, is he in love? Because every time she's tried to kiss him, he's pulled away from her, and now he's wrestling with whether or not he loves her or not. It just didn't make any sense.
Because he found out she was his auntie. He's
Right.
like, Auntie, I don't want to make out with you anymore. It's kind of weird. I know
Thank
you
you.
grew up that way, where you all married your sister wife.
Yep.
You know, Aegon with his sister wives,
does-
conquering Westeros and
I'm
whatnot.
just saying, if I find out last week that she's my first cousin and this week that she's a genocidal maniac, my love isn't as strong.
Right.
I'm not Otis Redding over here.
So see, this is why it's beautiful, because she was a suicidal maniac the entire time. She was just killing people that were bad. She loved burning the Dothraki villages down. She loved conquering those cities. She loved killing the dead.
The slave
She
masters.
loved it all. She loved she was fire and blood the entire show, but she never killed the good people until the end.
So that's
she
why
did the
the-
exact same thing she'd done to all the other villages.
Right.
And lazy writing, kind of, to speed things up. That's why they put Tyrion in the last episode to basically explain that to people that might have
Right.
a problem with her all of a sudden flipping to Mad Queen. He's like, no, it's been there the whole time. Let me tell you.
Exactly right. And what happened with Varys in the notes that he sent around to all the kingdoms, and like you had to see a meme to notice that he was trying to poison her. Like they're just like these little sloppy things that you go, I don't get why Jon Snow gets neutered from a story perspective, and then he's bargained over, even though he's the rightful king of the Seven Kingdoms. He gets bargained over, and then the Unsullied leave, and then his brother who's king and his sister who's North King, they don't go, hey, well now that they're gone, that deal's off. You can do whatever you want. You can stay here if you'd like. They have this weird tortured scene on the dock where they all see the ships going away and they're like, yeah, but you still have to go not fuck some chicks at the wall. Like, sorry, bro. Like, I know you did a lot for us. You did a lot. Like, it just, some of it didn't make sense. And then Arya never gets any kind of glory for killing the Night King. What scene did we see her get crowned?
They toasted her at Winterfell.
Okay.
To the hero
She wasn't
of
there.
Winterfell.
We could go to
Right.
Shallow's Antique Restaurant right now and toast you. Like,
I would like that. You should do that, please.
all right, fine.
Take pictures.
Great chips.
So there were
So you say that doesn't make sense,
which part?
that John was sent to the Castle Black
Yes, if you can
to
explain
join the Night's Watch.
If
I
you
can.
explain to me,
I can.
other than we need to cash out on a spinoff series.
So
Like Arya's ending made complete sense. Sansa, complete sense. Daenerys, complete sense. Jon Snow, I don't get what they were doing with Jon
He's
Snow.
back to where he started too.
He was the Christ-like figure throughout
He's
this
where
whole
he's
thing,
supposed to
and
be,
then
like I
he's not.
said.
He's just flops at the end.
So, he was sent to join the Night's Watch.
Mm-hmm.
There is no Night's Watch, Chris Spangle.
Okay.
So when Tyrion said that, there should have been a big wink.
Ah, okay.
Hey,
All right.
you go join your buddies up there at the wall. You have a whole entire other queen in between us and you.
Right.
You do what you want. There's no more White Walker threat. There's no more wildling threat, which was what the wall was there for.
Mm-hmm.
It was perfect.
All right, I can see that.
Thank
you get to go live. All right, I can buy that.
I thought he was just sent to go. He was just the Lord Commander now of the Night's Watch, whatever that was, to
Right.
take in the people of, the 7 or 6 kingdoms in the north that maybe they break the law or they're the outcasts of their family, like your Samwells.
That's why they shut. That's why he walked out the gate.
I
in
thought,
spring, and
but
and
I
it
thought
shut
he
behind
was,
him, and he was walking with the wildlings out because
But-
he's not staying at Castle Black. He's
I know,
free.
but I thought he was going Gault. That's why part of why I like the ending. You've ruined the only part of his ending that I liked is that a character went Gault and said, "I'm walking away from the world that you nuts have created, and I'm going Gault in the north."
I know that's why I loved it.
Right. And you've ruined that for me now.
No, it's great. It's still true.
Here's what I will say, and this
Grey
is
Worm doesn't know that. Grey Worm thinks he's shackled up there,
Grey
and
Worm's
training
going to the beach.
criminals.
So here's what I really did like about it. I thought that the scene with Daenerys was the great thing about the series as a whole is it really illustrates for us political power.
It's time to shake up your podcast feed, folks, by subscribing to Lions of Liberty, the only libertarian variety show out there. Spend Mondays with me, Mark Claire, as I feature in-depth interviews with great names in the libertarian community and fun roundtable discussions.
Electric Liberty Land with me, Brian McWilliams, every Wednesday, your weekly dose of comedy, culture, and liberty.
And Felony Fridays with me, John Odermatt, where I expose injustice in the broken criminal justice system.
Find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and at lionsofliberty.com.
Kind of shows you the absurdity of political power and the absurdity of trying to rule over others and how it corrupts people wholly, even decent people that you think, like Daenerys, you think she's a decent person, she's going to save everyone, she's going to break the wheel, but she just turns out to be another dictator who's going to destroy the world. And I thought that scene, the taking her from a person that you're really rooting for to a person that you despise by the end was a great example of how power completely corrupts both the person who is seeking power and also how many innocent people it hurts in the process. And I thought that the dragon seeing the throne as the thing that killed Daenerys, while being a bit obvious, was very apropos and a really good ending to that entire arc. And I think one that we can, as libertarians, really apply to how we view political power. I mean, have you thought about it in that?
I kind of just thought Drogon was just kind of breathing fire in general, which ended up, in a result, melting the throne. But because he wasn't necessarily aiming right at it, he was just like screaming.
Yeah.
But in the result of it, melting it down.
Well, he wasn't going to kill the last Targaryen.
I know, but I really did want Drogon to kind of breathe fire at Jon and be like, oh, look, he's unburnt. What?
Right.
And then he just started to worship him, kind of.
Right.
And then he'll be like, go away. I gave up Ghost. I can't hang out with you.
Yeah.
And then they all go live in the north together.
I mean, what did you think about that arc?
Well, couple things. One, while the Starks have been portrayed as honorable throughout the series, they've also been portrayed as, how do I put this delicately, stupid. So my first question is, how did they find out that Jon put a knife through her heart? Like, why shouldn't he have cut his arm and said, the dragon came in, freaked out, she flew off, I don't know where they went, and I got cut.
Exactly. You were waiting for Grey Worm to run in and
is
arrest
it possible
him.
John just said, "Oh yeah, I killed her"?
It's
possible because
He
that's
did.
the kind of person that he
He's
is.
honorable. He would tell the truth.
I wouldn't put it past him.
I mean, the only explanation that you don't get is Jon Snow told on himself, which is so stupid. He could have walked out and been like, "I'm the king." He could have climbed on that dragon, and then he could have killed the Unsullied. He could have killed and said Daenerys Targaryen was a traitor. I'm saving it, and then. Or taking the dragon to fight the Unsullied with his sisters and all the Northmen and everybody else. And instead, you get Tyrion waking up in a prison 3 weeks later, and Jon's a prisoner for what reason?
It is stupid, but it's not out of character.
Well,
because he could be.
I get
he
it.
could be.
I
he
get
is
it.
that stupid.
Just like Ned,
he
I
knows
have
nothing,
this letter.
You know?
Yeah, right.
What letter? It's like, dang, good one, Cersei.
Right. So I want
to
to
think about that.
I referenced real quick before we started, how I would have rewritten the ending, and mine would have been that, Drogon kind of bends down toward Jon. Jon touches his snout and climbs up on him and says,
right.
I'm the last Targaryen, and
look at me.
I'm the
captain.
dragon.
I'm the captain of the ship.
Right, and the dragon recognizes him as a
wall.
Targaryen. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that would have been pretty good.
But they
if
didn't
he left
consult
on
me,
his own
sadly.
terms instead of being forced to leave.
I just would have liked
I
to
would
see
have
that
liked that.
episode, though, of the conflict, of them finding Jon, how he does it. That's, again, that right there is an entire episode. Or if we could just jump cut,
It's a
grow
whole
a beard.
book that now
bam.
you get to read all the books and you get all the thrones you've ever wanted.
He's not going to make
Hopefully.
it. Let's be honest.
What?
He's too busy. He's.
But she's still got some books to read.
So Cato actually did an entire breakdown, I think maybe yesterday, about this is 2017. Looks like Cato did. I'll put it in the show notes and the link to the Guardian article that I pulled this from. But one of the guys in the panel discussion on the Power and Game of Thrones said there's a lot of talk about breaking the wheel, but there's really little analysis of what the wheel is made of, what it would take to break it, and what you would build in its place. And another guy agreed, it seems like Daenerys is thinking about what the system will be like, hasn't progressed beyond, I will be on the throne, and I will not be a bad person like my father was, like Cersei is, like these other people are. But he felt that our own world was not immune to that sort of thinking. You can see it in even today liberal democratic societies where candidates promise us things like, I will bring you change you can believe in, or you give me power, I can only do it, I'll solve your problems. I only can do it if you let me solve your problems. Excuse me. That's a better and easier campaign strategy than, I will build some good institutions. That doesn't fit into your 30-second ad very well. And that's very true. And so you sort of look at it, and I don't think a lot of us sit and examine what it takes to build political power. And I think libertarians especially, I look at libertarians and I think, Daenerys doesn't think about what will it take to replace the wheel. Libertarians spend so much time talking about hating government, and they focus solely on I heard Michael Malice talk about his new book on Glenn Beck this past week, and it was just a really great conversation that Malice had. You can find it on Beck's SoundCloud, where he talked about libertarians and the right in general focus on Washington. They focus on the fourth quarter. They don't focus on culture. They don't, and not culture in terms of just entertainment. They focus on, institution building. We don't talk about institutions and things like, if you talk about the family as a libertarian, you get called a conservative and you're just a Republican, right? Like, the family is sort of a core part of building no matter what your family looks like, a small group, a small band of people that you rely on is incredibly important in building a free society. And so I think libertarians...
Whoa, wait a minute. We're watching a show where the families, the conflict among the families is why you get all of the dead innocent people. It's this person killed, the unborn, the king, and then this person betrayed us here, and then so I have, Oberon comes over just to kill Gregor Clegane. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily lead to a free society.
But that's the problem, that it's human beings in general. Like, we're all corrupt to the soul, and
Family's the reason why Jon Snow finally killed Dany, though,
Right.
because when he knows that Arya and Sansa aren't going to bend the knee, so she's going to go kill his sisters. So he's like, you know what, I got to do this. So family number one.
I think we lost the YouTube, but well, that's annoying.
We're back online.
We're back.
We're back on live.
We're back. Don't quite know what happened there. I apologize.
Sorry you missed us, but I can assure the audience that what we said was both insightful and witty.
Nah, I just took my pants off.
You're talking about this though, and I think that the moment in the final episode that talks about what you're saying is when, or a good moment at least, was when they were laughing about capitalism, or democracy, and
right,
and they just dismissed it so easy, and that was going into the final season. That was my hope. I was hoping that they would just destroy the throne and that they would vote and become a democracy, and I thought that would be a great ending.
Yeah,
but it was way more realistic that they laughed it off, but I like that they addressed it and that it was there, and I really liked that part.
Yeah, so they come out of it and they literally laugh in the face, and then they let Tyrion essentially, in my opinion, maneuver himself into ruling the realm, and the people who are in control maintain control, with a few minor exceptions that it will, it's not going to be. It's just minor tweaks. It's what did I see? Let me look at my notes here that I thought was kind of a person. I forget what article I was reading, but I just grabbed this real quick. Now, it was on Vox. Now, my personal preference, it was Vox's recap of Game of Thrones. He writes, now my personal preference was always Tyrion invents democracy as a way to wrap up this series, and he sort of did that, proposing that the lords and ladies of the great houses of the Seven Kingdoms choose all future rulers. Still, the very idea of Bran ending up as king is a bit ridiculous, but maybe that's the point. Everyone chuckles at the very notion of a democracy that allows everybody in the Seven Kingdoms a vote when Sam Tarly proposes it. Maybe the Seven Kingdoms need to struggle along in monarchy for a while longer, and if they do, well, why not have an all-seeing demigod on the throne to flatly intone about tax policies and land usage, long live the king? But I thought that was a great point, in that we see that and we go, why wouldn't they choose democracy? But if you really think, I think as libertarians, we sort of look at the current state of our choices and how we make choices, and we go, well, isn't this all patently ridiculous? I think somebody from 1300 will go, well, it's way better ordered with a king. Why way better than this? Like, what are you talking about? Like, you don't have freedom, just like we don't have freedom to do what you want within certain exceptions. So I don't know. I think that, again, going back to the scene where Tyrion maneuvers himself into being the king. He comes in, he puts all the chairs in order, sits in the chair. They come in, they talk about what the brothels. They start arguing about brothels, and versus do we help people or do we build brothels? And they're talking about absurd nonsense.
Those are not mutually exclusive options.
Right. They're talking about absurd nonsense, and you just sort of go, as it pulled back, I just went, holy shit, this is brilliant. And I don't know if I said it earlier, but it was the moment for me when I realized it doesn't matter what choice Jon Snow made. The wheel will continue, meaning people will always think that they ought to rule over others and will stop at nothing to get to that place. And if you study anything about history, or our history, or the world's history, the more you study history, the more you start to see our own times and our own behaviors in people of the past, especially now that you have histories that are much less propagandistic and trying to push a certain narrative. Now it's more, this is who the real person was, this is what actually happened. You start to see that it really doesn't matter how much, what you do, even if you're Jon Snow putting a knife in the heart of Daenerys, you're going to get the wheel. You're going to get people trying to rule over others, and all of these innocent people that are nuked are all, it doesn't matter. They were all going to be victims of the five people. Like, we all love the characters in Game of Thrones. We love those people. But if you're just a peasant in Game of Thrones time, those are their tormentors. Those are the people that are oppressing them. And their petty little differences and fights are the ones that cost them their lives over this throne. And you just see the absurdity of it all, and you start to kind of go, wow, this is brilliant, because they really illustrated a couple things very well in that the fall of Daenerys, the Barack Obama figure who ends up being, or we love this guy. Oh, what a disappointment. And he killed a lot of people with drones. Or you get just the fact that we're always going to kind of repeat the same history unless we start to make some changes about our own behaviors and choices. You look like you have something to say, Todd.
No, well, just I don't want to get too far into politics. But when we talk about democracy, one of the things I think that makes the U.S. an exception is our leaders have been hesitant to deploy our military domestically. When we try to export democracy to other countries, hey, that's part of the deal. If I get control of the military, then my clan, my family gets to be in power and get certain rights, and I'm going to punish the people that trod on me before. And I don't know exactly why, maybe an accident of history, but in the U.S. we see it as, oh, no, you really shouldn't deploy those troops. It's okay around the world, but around here, we're not necessarily going to listen to a president that says, hey, go arrest my political enemies.
I think one of the clearest examples of this was who's the guy that talked about brothels,
Braun,
the guy that says cock every episode. He said it best when he had the thing up against the head of the Lannisters. Do you think
it's a crossbow?
The thing
crossbow. Thank you. He goes,
"You've never seen a crossbow, have you?
All these great houses. It's some rough bastard like me,
a cutthroat, basically,
that started these houses that was ruthless enough to put themselves in this position.
A cutthroat that took Castlery Rock, and
and then all you grandsons of the cutthroats do all your cock sucking and ruin everything. And I thought.
He learned it from the
He's
Lannisters.
right. Where do you think
Lannister.
where do you think the Bushes got their money? Laundering Nazi gold. Where do you think Trump's money came from? Trump's grandfather ran a brothel in California or Alaska or somewhere. Wealth is built by the people who act like Donald Trump, unfortunately. And then the rest of us are all I'm just going to be nice. And it sucks. But I thought that was a very clear moment. So, you actually put together some examples.
Yes, 2 pages worth, and we're going to go over these in meticulous detail, one by one. Oh, I'm just kidding.
But this is really cool.
But you kind of see, Power Illustrated kind of walk us through some of this, and I'll put this into the show notes if you kind of want this summary. And really what I wanted to talk about tonight was how does political power corrupt both the people and hurt the innocent that they're trying to rule over. And you really did a great job. You can go and check out this list in the show notes. But just, to not have themselves told on, they push Bran out of a window. Daenerys is sold to Khal Drogo.
And at that point, Daenerys is an innocent, right? She's just a young girl that her brother sees as a way to gain power, so he can sell her off in exchange for soldiers.
Right. King Robert orders assassins to go kill Daenerys, who's innocent at that point. Joffrey. Joffrey was just one big giant abuse of power. Theon kills 2 innocent children in place of Bran and Rickon Stark. The Red Wedding. Slavers of Meereen have crucified children as a message to Daenerys and her army as they approach. Wildlings attack the wall out of desperation, and they're repelled in Season 4. Obviously, Season 5...
The Red Wedding is another example of that same kind of cheering that you were doing for Daenerys the whole time she was slaughtering the slavers and, the evil horse riders. The Red Wedding is they killed all the people you loved, and it was brutal, and you cried, and it was terrible, and it was the worst thing you ever saw on television. But then you cheered when Arya Stark went there and slaughtered another family.
Right.
But it was basically the exact same thing, But we cheered for that because of who it was.
Right, because they were on our side, they were on our team, but the other side...
And sometimes that's just not black and white like it, in reality. In the world we live in, that's why I like Game of Thrones, is a lot more complex like our world. It's not so black and white like Lord of the Rings or something,
And they kind of covered this in the books where Tywin has a conversation with Tyrion about the Red Wedding, and Tyrion's like, why in the world would you do that? And Tywin says, well, we could have had a battle in the open field, and a bunch of our people would have died too, and so is doing this way any worse?
Mm-hmm.
And as a reader, my answer is, yeah, it's a ton worse, because at the time, the rules of hospitality said if you're our invited guest, you're safe here, even if we're warring. Tywin, do you plan on being at war forever? Because it would be nice to not have war at some point, and then by doing this, that rule is gone. Now no one is going to feel safe ever again, or at least for not 100 years or generations or whatever.
Right.
So you can see the brutal logic, but that's not thinking very far ahead, in my opinion.
Yeah. So the Lannisters are the Americans, and you're the wife of an American soldier, a Lannister soldier, and your king or your ruler, their president just ended the war,
right?
With a CIA operation, so no soldiers needed to be deployed. You're super happy,
right?
Your husband's not going to be deployed, no risk of death. You're praising your government for that action, which is
to put a cap on what you're saying is that we don't see all life as equal, and we should.
Yeah,
right.
Well, I cheered for Arya when she killed all the Frey soldiers because she didn't kill like his daughters, but at the Red Wedding, Caitlyn, she gone. Robb Stark's wife and baby gone. Like
Right.
the women were on the table as well to kill, but she was I'm just going to kill the soldiers that helped facilitate the Red Wedding.
Justice and honor, and the innocent are
Right.
let go. Yeah,
So if you're going to kill, just kill the bad guys? Question mark.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
Not just indiscriminate killing. That's why you didn't have a problem with Daenerys using the dragons against the men on the planks of the walls, because they're fighting against her. They've made the choice.
okay, go. Sorry.
They've allegedly made the choice or been conscripted into that position, and then when they all surrender, we're all mad because she's killing innocent people. The reason that you have so much tension when Grey Worm is killing surrendered soldiers is that they're not posing a threat. They're bending the knee. They've given up their position and said, I no longer will fight against you. And they almost click into that innocent status. And that's why you feel that tug that this is unjust, that you're not supposed to do this. This is dishonorable.
The rules of war. Like, we
Right.
surrender. Cool, we won. Fight's over.
Right. Exactly. So that's... justice does make a difference. If you're talking about the death penalty, killing, there's a difference. I'm against the death penalty totally, but if it's Ted Bundy and it's pretty clear that he committed all these murders versus a guy who's had a bunch of questions and he might be innocent. Like in our minds, there's always that that tug. Like it's just to kill someone who's committed a lot of murders. It's unjust to kill someone who hasn't.
The people of King's Landing are not without sin.
In what way?
In the way that they yelled for the beheading of Ned Stark and convinced Joffrey to do it. In the way that they threw shit at Cersei Lannister as she walked down the streets back to the castle.
Right.
The people of King's Landing, it's all about perspective. They're not innocent.
Yeah, but that's really a misdemeanor. I don't think you can call for capital punishment.
It depends on who you are. If they threw shit at you, you might think different.
Are those dry, boring, run-of-the-mill political talk shows putting you to sleep on your commute or at work? Are you ready for some fun?
Look no further. Blast Off with Johnny Rocket is a Seattle-based podcast expressing viewpoints of free markets, voluntary exchange, badass music, wicked banner, and of course, drinking.
The Blast Off doesn't shy from the truth, but always brings the party.
Let's rock and roll, Raylene.
Bring it on, Johnny.
You can check us out at thelaunchpadmedia.com/blastoff.
Again, that's thelaunchpadmedia.com/blastoff.
Launchpad Media. Always launching ideas in your direction.
So let's kind of... I found some questions on some... I wish I had actually saved the site, so I apologize if I'm ripping off your work, but I don't believe in IP, so suck it, bro. These were some questions in a college course about the books, but I thought they were really kind of interesting questions, and it's questions about power. So where does power come from, and what do people do with it? And here's the bottom line. In a Game of Thrones, power isn't anything close to absolute. Power is continually shifting and changing. Even when you've got it, there's always someone else who's ready to snatch it from you. Maybe we could try defining power and where it comes from and skip what do people do with it. But in terms of political power, we tend to think of like Louis XIV, the Sun King, and absolute power, probably the most powerful monarch in the history of Europe. and he had absolute power, total control. If you watch the miniseries Versailles on Netflix, great, by the way, then you kind of see this displayed. But in something like that, or if you read about kings of old, like even an absolute monarch in Europe in 1650, or King Henry VIII, they still had rules. Like there were always people trying to take power from them. Their power was shifting or waning. King Charles, who basically ended up being dethroned in the First English Civil War, did some things that just kind of led the sands underneath him to fall out beneath him. So, and we tend to think in America, we tend to think that the American government is just all powerful and nothing can change it. But it can lose legitimacy if we wanted to. It's really so in your opinions, where does power come from?
Are you talking historically or in the modern age?
Let's talk about right now, relevant to the listener.
All right. I'll go with delegation.
I'll go at the barrel of a gun.
I say that as common citizens, we've essentially delegated, like, you know what, we don't want to really be protecting our property all the time. We're going to elect leaders to make all these rules, and that way I can, speaking for myself, I can go play video games when I'm done with work.
Right. Gault, you said at the barrel of a gun. What do you mean?
Because while he's playing video games, if he wants to light up a joint here in Indiana, if they smell it outside, they'll kick down his door and take him to jail.
Right.
That's because most of the citizens will not protest. I won't say that they agree, but they will not protest that rule.
So, Jess, you're not a political person necessarily, so I won't ask you to answer if you don't want to, but have you thought about where political power comes from, what the nature of it, or is it just something that you don't really think much about?
I try not to because it usually makes me sad.
You delegated
it. And it's
it.
because, exactly, I delegated it then, because I feel like the media tries to tell me what to think depending on where I'm watching or looking, and social media always tells me what to think, and it just makes me frustrated because
Right.
I would like to think for myself, which I will not do either because it just makes me sad. So ignorance is bliss, I guess. I'll plead that way. But in Game of Thrones, because I was so excited we started talking about power. Littlefinger's quote to Cersei, and he's getting all cocky. He's like, knowledge is power. And Cersei's like, take 2 steps forward to her soldiers. Kill Peter Baelish or whatever, and they start to kill him. She's like, no, don't. I changed my mind. Now take 2 steps back. And her whole point is, power is power, not knowledge. So you can know all the things, but it doesn't matter because if you're in charge, you're in charge, and you have all the power.
What was the power that she was exhibiting? That Cersei was exhibiting?
Well, the barrel of a knife.
Right.
A sword.
Yeah. It's the person who feels that they legitimately have the ability to kill you.
And the
legally.
person that won the throne won it at, the barrel of a WMD.
Which is the thinking behind...
That was her weapon of mass destruction, the dragon.
Which is the thinking behind the term taxation is theft, for instance. That if you don't comply, then men in costumes are going to come and arrest you and put you in jail.
Right.
I think this would actually be a good time. Let's play this for our good friend Jessica. You may not have heard this. Can somebody give her headphones? You may have heard Marshall Fritz explanation.
Were you playing in your office before?
No, I don't think so.
I hear a lot of Shapiro in there.
I try to not. I try not to. What's the term? Propagandize you too much. But this is a guy named Marshall. This is a guy named Marshall Fritz talking in the 80s. The Cato Institute actually saved this audio. And Marshall Fritz founded the Advocates for Self-Government, which are the quiz people. And probably he's on Mount Rushmore, like Ron Paul, Murray Rothbard, Hayek, and Marshall Fritz. And he's the one that nobody knows, but he's the guy who really empowered the grassroots in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s to get out there and work. And this is him.
Can you repeat who's on Mount Rushmore again for me?
George Washington.
Right.
Sorry.
Not my Mount Rushmore. But this is Marshall Fritz asking people to examine their principles.
If someone were to come into your house, he's wearing a ski mask, he's carrying a shotgun, gets the drop on you, and he robs you of a bunch of your stuff. In your opinion, is there something wrong with that? Yeah, sure, he says. Yeah, that's an easy one. How many of us would agree with John? That's obvious. He's saying, okay, good. Edgel, two people come into your home. Again, they're wearing the ski mask, they get the drop on you and all that sort of stuff. They're cleaning out some of your stuff. You've got this great big built-in television set, and there's this argument that ensues, do they have enough time to get the TV set out of there? And you bring up that your brother-in-law, a highway patrolman, is due over any minute right, to watch the game. It might be best that there isn't time. And they sort of decide to vote on it. And it turns out the vote is 2-1. And they take the TV set. Edgel, does the process of taking your stuff become morally okay if you're allowed to vote on it? If they employ democratic principles and allow you to vote? No. How many of us think that if you get to vote on it, it's okay if people take your stuff? Only if you have a big family. Only if you have a big family. Martha, 3 of them come into your house. This time they're not even wearing, they're very brazen now, they're not wearing ski masks, they're dressed in suits and all that sort of thing. You can see that they're carrying guns. And they've prepared a list of things that they want you to give them, including your Mercedes. But one of them comments, he says, Martha, young, delightful people like you should be in an exercise program. And while we are going to take your Mercedes, we're going to give you this nice Schwinn. And we encourage you to ride to work and ride to play and whatever. So they leave and all. Is it okay if someone takes your Mercedes as long as you get something, some return on your investment? You got this Schwinn out of it. Is it okay now? Not a good return, but does the morality of their taking your car change because they left you something behind? You got something good out of it. You got the Schwinn. Did the morality of the theft change because you got something? No. How many of us agree with Martha that the morality did not change? Okay, good. Bill, there you are. All right. 4 of them come into your shop. Same thing with the Mercedes and the list and all this kind of a stuff. But they do one more thing. Bill, they're going to not only give you a Schwinn, but they're going to give a Schwinn to a poor person down in Paraguay who needs a Schwinn in order for her to get to work and all and support her family. Let's say a couple of things here. One, you have not only a generic belief in value in helping disadvantaged people, but you have a very specific burden on your heart for the people of Paraguay. You lived down there as a kid. Your mom was the ambassador. You went back in the Peace Corps, and you've got this great sense for the people of Paraguay. Bill, is it morally okay for someone to take your Mercedes if they do something that you consider good with some of the proceeds?
It's not morally okay.
That does not become morally okay, in your opinion. How many of us agree with Bill that even though they're doing something sort of nice that we approve of, it doesn't become the morality of it doesn't change? All right. Let's see, what were we up to? 4. Chris, what if we had 14 in the group? Would it be okay then?
I don't believe so.
No? Richard, 40? Philip, 400? Linda, 4,000? 4 million, Phyllis? 104 million? Hey, watch it, guys. You're wrecking the carpet. I think libertarianism is the basic principles that your mom and dad, in all likelihood, taught you. They're the principles that my mom and dad taught me. Morality does not come from what the group decides. How many of us tell our teenage children, well, you just find out what everybody else is doing and then you do that? Oh, no! That's not the way we decide morality.
So that is Marshall Fritz talking about the morality of voting and taxation and government and power. What are your impressions of that, Jess?
It's a... Wow, I can hear myself. That was weird. It's just a different way to put it. I like putting it into simple words. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
For the peons like me, that's like, I just pay taxes.
Right.
You
Normie.
do what you want to do. Yeah, normie.
Friggin' normie.
But what about okay, so in Star Trek, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Is that like the counter to that, where we pay taxes to take care of everyone and...
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
So, if you want to get that clip, you can go to wearelibertarians.com/libertarianism, and then it's on Big Idea 1. You can grab that there. But we have a kind of a basic walkthrough of libertarianism at wearelibertarians.com. Look for New to Libertarianism in the top bar. Sorry, I had to plug, Jess. You're in radio. You understand. But I don't think that the intention... a lot of times is let's design a government that centrally plans to solve the needs of the many. What you get is a small group of people trying to maintain power. You could look at the founding of America, and you can look at it 2 ways. and both of which are not inaccurate. First way is that the American founding was an enormous leap in human history, where a group of men decided to decentralize power, spread it out amongst the states, and diffuse the power, allow Alabama to have the most restrictions on abortion, while New York allows you to have the least restrictions on abortion, and the two can both cooperate peacefully. You can look at it as a massive step forward in human history, where they said there's no longer going to be a king. Every man is the king of themselves. Or you could look at it as a group of white slave owners, which is not totally... go talk to John Adams about slavery. A group of essentially the lords of America, as you saw in the Game of Thrones scene, where Tyrion's convincing them to select Bran, making sure that their personal economic interests are secured. Both of those are true. They set up in 1797, 95, when the Constitution was ratified, they recreated the articles into the Constitution and built a system that was freer than any other government in human history. But at the same time did it in a way that protected themselves and their interests, just like the Lords of the Seven Kingdoms.
Six.
It's gray, just like reality.
And so, right.
Not so black and white.
And then over time, you get to a point 200 and nearly 50 years later where we're at now, where you have a more centralized government. You have people along the ways, there's something called the social gospel that was very popular after the Civil War. There was a very real problem after the Civil War into the early 1900s, which is part of why Prohibition was supported. I mean, if you think about it, you know how hard it is to pass an amendment to the Constitution. They were able to amend the Constitution to pass Prohibition, which means there had to be massive support in the states and in the United States to pass a prohibition on alcohol. It wasn't just the stroke of a pen like executive power now. I mean, it was a constitutional amendment. But it had the backing because during the Civil War, you had men for the first time traveling outside of their local areas. They were drinking a lot. They were carousing a lot. And then they came home, and the carousing never stopped. The drinking never stopped. The abuse of their wives from the PTSD and other reasons never stopped. And so you had societies that were kind of out of control. And so the idea of the social gospel popped up, and it was the idea that individual salvation isn't as important as purifying the nation and saving the soul of a nation. And so we must prohibit dancing. And they literally used to monitor everyone's postal mail. Like Anthony Comstock got put in charge of the mail, and like... You couldn't get certain magazines delivered because the United States Postal Service would no longer deliver that mail. You had Prohibition come out of that. You had a lot of ideas, this idea that the federal government now should be in charge of being the moral arbiter of what is good and what is not in the United States. That's completely counter to the founding, but came out of very noble intentions.
Right.
We want less men to beat their wives. We want less men to be drunks. We want more productive men to be part of society. What's the best way to do it? Let's pass a law at the federal level. And then that thinking, in the Republican Party through T.R. Roosevelt and through the Democratic Party with Woodrow Wilson, introduces these strains that eventually lead us to the modern parties that we have now, where everybody's arguing over... Like, there are people right now protesting abortion in Indiana over Alabama laws. You don't have dick to do in Indiana with what goes on in Alabama. Like, you're stupid. You're just kind of, like, you don't understand how the actual republic works. You're just mad because you want your rights to be protected. So if you're mad in Indiana about something that's going on in Alabama, when a politician at the federal level comes along and says, I'm going to make sure that Alabama's laws don't happen, you're going to vote for that person. And they're trying to gain their political power by saying, I will get the federal government to do stuff. And as a non-political person, what race do you pay attention to? Maybe president,
Yeah. Even that gets kind of depressing. Governor.
Right.
Mayor. That's about it.
Right.
Sorry, everybody else.
We're not judging you because most of the people that listen don't even vote. But yeah, like most people like Pete Buttigieg or Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump want to run for president because it gives them the biggest chunk of power they possibly can have. But we never stop to really kind of ask ourselves, is any of this power theirs to have in the first place? Which I thought was kind of a good question. The last questions from this thing was, does a Game of Thrones say anything about... Now, before I ask this question, did I even come close to answering kind of your question?
Yeah, sure.
What was your question?
I forgot now.
Yeah, right.
Basically, it's like if I make more money, I don't know. What are your thoughts on what he said?
I think I said a lot.
Like I should start asking you like what I asked my teacher in school.
That was a very powerful clip that when I heard it, I went, oh, I'd been a libertarian since Todd hired me in 2008. I'd been a libertarian since 2007. I heard that in 2013, and I went, oh, I never thought of power in terms of morality. I never thought of the United States government or my local government in terms of, is their power moral or legitimate? And would I conduct my personal behavior in that way? No. Like, I wouldn't steal from you. It's against my personal morality, so why is it okay that I elect other people and outsource that ability to steal to someone else? So it was a very instructive clip for me, to be honest. But I think it's so far removed from how people like yourself, Jessica, think about government. You just kind of think like, oh, I have these two choices. Who should I choose? But you never kind of get to the place where you go, should I choose? Do I have to? Like, why do they have the ability? Why are there only two choices? We never kind of step out of that binary choice and kind of start examining it from a larger perspective.
If you lived in Australia, you have to choose.
Right. Yeah, that's mandatory voting.
We're just like the lords that laugh at democracy when it was really the best choice.
Right. Was it? Because Hans Hermann Hoppe saw that clip and he went, I agree, so to speak.
Well, I know you wanted to get something else, but I'm going to interject here. One of the things that as I watched, the scene with Daenerys in the final season, it reminded me of, or I guess I drew a parallel in history of, you've made as smart people, you've made this decision of, I'm going to support this person. I think this is the best person. And then once it becomes apparent that you've elevated this person has a ton of power, how do we change our minds? How do we get rid of her? I kind of thought like, this is probably how Stalin got to power.
Yeah.
We decided that Stalin was the right guy. This is the person that can change things in the right direction. Then he actually gets into power, and you're like, uh-oh, what have we done? And what are our options now? Gosh, we don't really have any options.
It's also the incentives that are set up in the system, too. Like, you have a system like a monarchy, like the Game of Thrones. There's no other place but... There's no... Like, Jon Snow would have been corrupted by that system. Like, I heard Glenn Beck talk about one time when Bush was president. This is how long ago this was. Obama had been in office like maybe a year, and Obama had just made some decision that was very Bush-like in terms of foreign policy. And he told a story about how he was visiting Bush in the Oval Office one day. The TV was on, and Obama was giving an anti-war speech, and Bush just kind of like stopped, looked at the TV, then looked at Beck, and he goes, he's going to totally change his mind when he gets in this office. He goes, when you sit in this seat, everything changes. When you're out there on the stump speech, everything's different than when you actually sit in the seat. And so when you see somebody who is diametrically opposed to George W. Bush coming into office and continuing his policies, and then Trump diametrically opposed to Obama getting into office and continuing Bush and Obama's policies, like you see the wheel continuing on the federal level, you have to go, you couldn't pick three more different men than Bush, Obama, and Trump, and yet there's a continuation of the government. Maybe the system itself is set up, and it doesn't matter who we put in the seat. It's the choices that have been made for them over the last 250 years or 50 years. You look at Trump, and Trump's trying not to do certain things, and his advisors just hide the pieces of paper from him, or they don't follow through on his orders, or Trump seems fairly non-interventionist compared to Bush and Obama, and yet here we are talking about Iran and going to war with Iran, and it's the same people that are in the swamp that he's kind of surrounded himself heading into his second term, which I think he'll probably be reelected, and you just sort of go, how did all the Bush people get back in charge? Trump is the farthest thing from a Bush person, and yet all of Bush's advisors are in charge. It's not like he has better ideas because, like Daenerys, what do you do when the wheel's broken? What do you do when you get to the White House? I need to staff thousands of offices. And so what does Trump do? He goes to Republican think tanks in Washington, D.C., and hires the same people that went to work for those think tanks when they left the Bush administration. And so the millions of choices a day that are made in the alphabet soup of the EPA, the FCC, the FDA, are made by people who have sort of a governing philosophy that just is a continuation of the wheel.
And those positions attract a certain type of person. I don't really want to run other people's lives. So if you ask me, hey, would you do this? I'm like, I'll do it for one term maybe because you're my friend. But then if somebody else comes in and asks, nah, I'm done with that. But the people that, John Bolton and the career bureaucrats, like, they want to make those decisions. They want to interfere in other people's lives because they know better, Chris.
Well, but a lot of, and like I have been spending a lot of time at the local establishment lately, and with the swamp, we talk to people. I talked to Rob Cortell in our series from the Swamp, or the Swamp Explained, and you don't get, you find that those people don't see it the way that we see it. They don't see themselves as wielding power, and if they do, they're wielding it for the right reasons. They're doing it for the responsible thing. We just know better than you because we're better connected, have better information, and so we're doing what's right on your behalf. It's public service. That could be completely true, but then the other two things can be true at once. The other truth is that I don't want you making those decisions for me. I don't need you to make those decisions for me. Quit your job and don't replace you.
I don't want a new soccer stadium funded with taxpayer dollars in Indianapolis.
Right. But,
me either.
But you don't understand. Yeah. The downtown core with 41,000 hospitality jobs depend on furthering the sports strategy of building sports stadiums. And if we don't build a soccer stadium, then we give up on that strategy that gave us a vibrant downtown that's the envy of the world, Todd. And there's some truth to that. There's absolutely truth to the fact that Indianapolis investing city dollars.
When the Pacers were playing in Market Square when I was growing up, you did not want to be in downtown after night.
Absolutely. And there is a lot of truth to the fact that using taxpayer money to build these sports arenas downtown and build a mall downtown led to Indianapolis having a downtown that is much different than Philadelphia, Columbus,
Atlanta.
Cincinnati, Atlanta. It is a great downtown. But the choice now, if you were mayor, the choice was made for you in 1969 when Lugar was mayor, or 1972 when Hudnut was mayor. You now continue that policy or you don't, because you now have 41,000 people that are dependent on that environment.
Question, because I can talk soccer a little bit, not politics. How come they want their own stadium, their own soccer stadium, right? Because in Atlanta, they just got a Major League Soccer team, the Atlanta United, and they are sharing the Mercedes-Benz, stadium with the Falcons, and it works out pretty well because whatever.
Yeah,
how come
actually,
we can't just do that?
I have a good friend that got season tickets to the soccer.
I've been to
team,
a couple games.
And
They're
he
fantastic.
really liked it. Yeah, so I think that the people on the ground floor of MLS, they didn't have to have a soccer-specific stadium, but what MLS has said is from now on, anyone who gets an expansion franchise, like Cincinnati is building a new one, for example, has to have a dedicated soccer-only stadium to be approved into MLS.
I'm not informed. Thank you.
No, that's why you're here.
That's why I'm here. I'm the. What is it? What am I? The
voice of the
normie?
listener. Yes.
The normie.
The normie.
You're here to be the voice of the listener.
I'm
for
a
this
muggle.
Muggle. Because what you have to understand, Jess, and I want to do more of this on episodes, is that there are more of our listeners like you trying to figure stuff out. And so if you're here going, I have a question, that's better for our audience than having a bunch of people like me going, Ree! are you just talking over everyone's head?
I mean, I know Ron Paul. Nobody else you really mentioned. Right. Sorry.
So the real answer, he gave the answer that they tell you publicly. He gave you the answer that you read in the Indianapolis Business Journal. Here's the answer.
Indeed.
They're playing in Lucas Oil Stadium. That's a great stadium. A lot of taxpayer money built that stadium. But the guy who owns the soccer team is a real estate developer. And if he can convince IPS to sell the old Broad Ripple High School in one of the most vibrant areas of downtown, it's called Broad Ripple, it's a college area, that land is so valuable. He can then build condos, a soccer stadium, retail shops, and he now owns the land rights to one of the most valuable pieces of property in all of Indianapolis. And so, like Jim Irsay became a billionaire with the stroke of the pen when Mitch Daniels and the city of Indianapolis signed the deal for Lucas Oil Stadium, the Colts owner became a billionaire that day with that stroke of the pen because he was backed by the taxpayers of Indiana.
But where are my tickets?
You don't matter.
I didn't get Colts tickets, though.
Right. And here's the difference, is that people are willing to make a risk on the Colts because Joe Sixpack, it's aspirational. I may one day get to go to Lucas Oil Stadium, so I don't mind if my tax dollars go to it because I want to go to a Colts game and I don't want them to leave.
But I don't want to watch no gosh darn soccer.
Thank you. But he's still got the funding to build a soccer stadium, and it's because Ursal also is a major donor to a lot of Indiana politicians and lives in the neighborhood next to all of these politicians.
What?
Yeah.
Why is Bron on the small council?
Yeah,
that's right. Rub somebody's back just like that.
Right.
We got to get back to Game of Thrones.
He's just like the soccer guy. He's like, nobody wants you here, but you're here anyway.
Right.
One other thing on my list before we leave corruption entirely that really spoke to me was, and both in the books and Stannis Baratheon is portrayed as an honorable man. He is completely corrupted by power to the point where he lets someone kill his own daughter.
Is that the guy who at the end stood up to try and make the argument that he was the king? Or is this the guy?
That's Sansa's uncle that married the Walder Frey daughter.
That was Edmure Tully.
It was his red wedding, technically.
Oh, okay.
He's the guy that got married at the red wedding.
Okay, I remember who that is. No, you're talking about the guy who was dating
the red woman,
dating the red woman.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
Yes, and let her turn him into a shade with black magic for power,
to kill his other brother,
to kill his other brother for power, and eventually to sacrifice his own daughter.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think that one of the major themes for me with political corruption is that political power dehumanizes you. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you get to a certain point, you were talking about how like locally maybe they start like, I'm doing this for good, I'm doing this to help people, but eventually it doesn't. You lose that. And that's what happened to like all of your favorite characters in the show, is that they all got corrupted by that power and they lost their humanity. And Daenerys, even talking to Jon in that final episode, didn't see what she did. She still couldn't see
Zero
it, even
awareness.
with him like begging her in her face. She still couldn't see what she did, and it was like she had lost all of her humanity to me.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with Stannis. That's why I remembered that, is because Stannis did the same exact thing happen to him. That was almost parallel.
Yeah, they become so convinced that what they're doing is right that they lose sight that they're hurting people. Like the people who designed CPS thought that they were helping children, but the end result is that CPS just it makes people think that they did something by calling CPS, and children never get helped. Oh, I'm a doctor, I just called CPS. Well, they don't do anything. They don't protect kids. Anybody who's ever watched CPS and how they operate, I have so many female friends who they get investigated because their ex has been called, CPS has been called on their ex. They get them out to the house, but the ex has a lawyer, and so they don't go investigate him. And so the behavior from the man continues while the woman and her children suffer because the doctors and the teachers and everybody called CPS. We felt like we did something, and that's the end result of it. And so innocent people just get hurt all of the time. So,
it's kind of depressing.
I know. Welcome to We Are Libertarians. So Are there any forms of power that the powerless have? Think about Arya, Sansa, Bran, and Rickon. Or children have less obvious power in this book, but do they hold any power over others? I mean, what power do the seemingly powerless in our society or in the story, what sort of threads of power do you see them having? I mean, in my mind, the trauma that the Stark girls go through, for instance, ends up making them have nerves of steel. You look at their mother and you go, wow, how did she become that way? Well, she became that way because she went through the same thing Sansa did. You know, and so we tend to look at older people and go, how'd they get that strength? It's like, because they were weak and went through shit at one point. And to me, that is one example of how people gain power, is they rise above those circumstances and work through situations where they felt powerless.
So she was in an accident in outer space, and then she got reborn.
Right?
No, is that not how Caitlin Stark? What?
Did I say her name wrong?
No, you're fine.
Okay, all right.
Real nerds will get the reference.
All right, good. You laughed, did you? Yeah. All right. So, any other thoughts about the powerless in this particular story or in our own society? What powers do they might possibly wield?
I mean, persuasion, right? I mean, kids are cute because when they're acting like assholes, you don't strangle them. Okay? I have 2 kids of my own, so for example, Ned Stark. The only reason that he agrees to, confess to treason is to save his daughter's lives. So his daughters, in that way, have a power over their father.
What about the little birds, the kids that are working for Varys, the Master of Whispers?
Yeah.
They're learning from him because as a kid you're unsuspected,
right?
But you can kind of gain power that way, work your way up the ranks eventually.
Seduction is another form of power. The way that seduction came about over time is that physically women couldn't compete with men in prehistory, and then until recent history, really. And so seduction was the power that women wielded to further their own interests. That's one way. That's one particular power.
That'd be Marjorie,
right?
In this case, probably.
Yeah.
Magic, supernatural power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not in reality, but in the show, there is that power.
I believe
Children of the Forest.
I believe in God.
They're not strong, but they have magic.
Bran, obviously.
Yeah.
There are some specific examples that are called out in the show.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that one power that isn't often seen as maybe social custom or social norms or even the law is a power that helps protect the innocent. You see in the case like mercy, for instance. Maybe there's some examples in Game of Thrones of mercy where it was shown, and that maybe somebody was about Tyrion. When Tyrion is alleged to have poisoned Joffrey, and mercy is shown to him. That's one example of power that people can have over the innocent.
We're talking about individual power. I was just thinking of the church, institutional power.
Yeah.
Like how the High Sparrow rose from, barefoot in the streets to
right
having the queen and 2 queens locked up in a dungeon, basically.
They had the most power until Cersei basically blasted them.
And the opposite of that is money, right? The Lannisters have power because there's gold under Casterly Rock. So,
yep.
So I guess we could say that we started out with the immorality of political power in a lot of ways, but there are forms of power that are moral, things like justice, things like mercy, that are wielded in our moral powers.
It kind of gets Jon Snow killed, right? Because he wants to go against custom, invite the wildlings and the giants in, and no, you can't just kill the giant. He's eating vegetables and such. And the Night Watch, basically, the mutineers say, that isn't right. For the Night's Watch, we're going to kill you.
Hey, Todd, do you remember for 7 seasons we heard winter is coming, and then we got to stock food, and then winter came, and then nothing happened with winter?
They killed it. They ended the long night.
But winter still happened.
It still did trickle down because it started snowing in King's Landing.
Yeah, right. That was nuclear winter, though.
Yeah, that's just
in the books, he does infer that maybe when the long night ends, that the seasons might become a little more regular. Instead of
who doesn't need to be
long.
Didn't you see the grass north of the wall when they're getting ready to enter the haunted forest?
There was spring north of the wall.
What is it? The dreams of spring or whatever?
I did not. All right, let's give our final thoughts on the show, on all of this. Let's go around. Gault, you're an old veteran. Why don't you show the young kids how it's done?
Well, I kind of went into mine. It's all about. I think it was all about dehumanization. And one other point I'll make about it, like with Stannis that did it, and then you also had the opposite happen with Cersei. She had all that political power, and she wasn't a human for seasons. For many seasons, we didn't see any emotion from her.
She was her father.
And at the end, when she lost her political power, she became human again, and she cared about her baby and her brother, and you almost wanted, you didn't want to, but you almost felt something for her there. And that was I think it was pretty clear there that once she lost that power, she got her humanity back.
Yeah. All right, Jess Alsman, final thoughts on Game of Thrones or Power or anything that you'd like to say?
Overall, great series. I think the characters are very just detailed, and there's more to them than just on the surface, which is really cool to see the character arcs and how they develop and how they handle situations like either getting power or having to, find their own strength, whether it be Sansa or Arya or, I don't know, Jon, bless his heart in the end. Still want to see him on the throne, but whatever. He can go be wild north of the wall,
I guess.
So, I don't know. It's really cool. And I like how I'm on here, and you guys are kind of putting real world stuff into it. I appreciate that. Not just me comparing Game of Thrones to Lord of the Rings.
It's a new way to think about it, isn't it?
Did you learn anything this episode?
I did.
What did you learn?
What do you think, Todd? Of Game of
What do you
Thrones?
think, Todd?
Or Game of Thrones.
I like that.
Of
I'm going to
this
start
whole
doing
episode.
that.
I want to reiterate something that Jess said, that I really enjoyed the series. I really enjoyed the first 3 books. But, so while I have some nitpicks, this was great entertainment, great television, great acting. So even though I said, some things, some nitpicks, I really thank HBO for putting all the money into it and all the entertainment. So final words here. I'm going to just mention this. Robbie Suave from Reason, he wrote several things on Game of Thrones this season, and he talked about in a podcast recently, both Jon and Tyrion rebuke this madness Daenerys is referring to. It's hard not to recognize a kind of libertarian principle in their condemnation. On the podcast, I referenced C.S. Lewis's famous quote about tyrants, and it's fitting here to reproduce the entire thing. Quote, "Of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. It would be better to live under robber barons than under omnipotent moral busybodies. The robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep, his cupidity may at some point be satiated, but those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience. They may be more likely to go to heaven, yet at the same time likelier to make a hell of earth." And that's why Jon had to kill Daenerys.
Yeah.
That's
really good.
Malice mentioned that quote. I would recommend Michael Malice's book, The New Right. If you've found this episode interesting, you'll find that book interesting as well. Were you done, by the way? I wanted to make sure that you got everything out. Okay. All right. Jessica's done.
I don't want to cut you off, Spangle.
No, it's okay.
Cut him off.
No.
That's what makes it great.
Cut him off.
When someone has, some kahunas to stand up to the dear leader.
Well, she made a joke about Todd, but I just want to make sure.
Get ready for 20 questions tomorrow in the office. Don't you dare put those headphones on. I'm like, so Spangle, tell me your thoughts on this with history, and when did this happen?
I will
and
just.
Why
look
did
at
they
you.
do this?
I go, can we just do a follow-up episode? Just got a text. Those of you who listen religiously, like Todd, you texted me and said, I heard Miranda was going to be on this episode. And so if you want some backup in case she doesn't show up, then I'll be there. And I said, come on down. I knew Gault was going to show up. He's Mr. Reliable. I asked Jess on. And then Miranda just texted me at 9:18 p.m. when we started at 7. Oh my God, I just realized today was Tuesday. LOL. Did you GOT podcast without me? Yes.
Yes, Miranda.
We
sorry.
are finishing it as we speak. LOL. No worries. I should have reminded her. But she's...
Follow-up episode on Game of Thrones? Is that what we're doing?
Yes. 1 more hour. All right, guys. Thanks so much for being here. I would say my wrap-up is that I loved the series as a whole. I thought, as you can see from this episode, it was very illustrative of a lot of things that we see in our own lives that can help us kind of elevate from this story and kind of examine things from a different perspective and look at political power from a different way. It kind of helps maybe marry it to sort of what we see today. I think for us individually, when we talk about what we can do, it really comes down to your individual choices. And what you see in Game of Thrones are a lot of individuals making a lot of choices. They have sometimes a binary choice between good and evil, or there's, even in our own lives, those moments of gray where I could lie and tell this little white lie and nobody's going to know the difference, but you start spinning out of control with that, or not all of us are Ned Stark and just full of honor all the time and always do the right thing, and not all of us are Daenerys Targaryen lighting everyone and committing genocide. A lot of us are the Clegane brothers, the Hound, who do good and bad things, and I think he is, for me, the most human in the story, because the Hound wants to just do whatever he wants to do and then get sucked along by duty and get sucked along by doing the right thing, but then sometimes in doing the right thing, it's necessary to do the bad thing. And I think he just is kind of, he exemplified the push and pull that we constantly see in our daily lives. And by his constantly making the right choice, meaning the good choice, we have that power too. And he became a very powerful person in the story. And so I think you have to think about what choices you make on a daily basis and how you interact with others and how you vote and how you express your values and what you think. And that really is your power. Your power is to make those individual choices. And the millions, the billions of people that live on this planet, the more we can convince and persuade to make the right choices and to enact your morality through your vote and stop just because you want to use the barrel of a gun and vote in a certain type of morality or a certain type of policy, it doesn't make your choice more moral. So just remember your own power and remember that it comes in the form of daily choices. So that's what I would say. Yes, Jess?
Can I make one more normie comment?
Please.
I would like to see in politics, and this is really hard because it'll never happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Find a leader that puts his or her interest aside, like Tormund did in Jon Snow. So Tormund with the wildlings and Jon Snow with the Night's Watch, everything you've ever heard or ever thought, let's put that all aside.
The big woman.
The best interest is to fight the dead that are coming south. And, you had some of the wildlings ticked off about it. And guess what? Most of them died because, oh, snap, they didn't get on the boats. And then you had the other people, the brothers of the Night's Watch. They end up killing Jon Snow, basically.
Yeah.
So
surprisingly, Tormund was one of the most moral characters.
Yeah.
Even when he was rejected by Brienne, he just said,
he was the most real.
I'll go north, I'm not going to, fight him over her or nothing,
I wish
she made her choice.
I wish I had saved the meme because it was like, we all want to laugh at Tormund, but when he got declined, he just shrugged his shoulders and went off and didn't call the girl a slut. And I was like, the girl was like, be like Tormund. But I would say, to your point, Jess, we don't need to find a leader. I think what you see in guys like Tormund or even Jon Snow, like they circumstances force them into leadership because they made the right choices. And I think if we can make the right choices, we become the leaders. Like, we don't have to find somebody, we don't have to delegate that or outsource that power to somebody else. We have the ability to step up and be those leaders.
Whoa, that's deep.
Thank you.
The power is within me the whole time.
Exactly, and you didn't even know it. So,
with great power comes great responsibility.
Oh, man, don't you put that on me, Spidey. Spidey's uncle.
So, I would be remiss if I didn't thank our patrons. I apologize that I did it so late in the episode. I just started geeking out.
You going to the 500?
Of course I'm going to the Indy 500.
I can't wait to see you and the rest of the wall crew in the infield. I'm going to come visit you guys again.
Awesome. I work... we have media passes, so
oh, cool.
Are you going out to the 500 too?
One day you'll have to
there.
get wall media passes because I would love.
Is there a wall tent? Am I invited to that?
I swear, if
Get a
Jeremiah,
wall media pass.
if Jeremiah,
Get 2 of 'em.
if Jeremiah doesn't quit
3 of 'em.
asking me, Jeremiah Morrill asks me weekly, all year long, every week, 52 times a year.
Well, you should do it and then give it to me instead of him.
I go, they're not going to give a libertarian podcast media passes.
They
out to the
will
500.
if you sponsor a car. Bet.
Okay, well, our Patreon's doing well, but not that well.
If you'd like to support, throw $5 million our way.
Right. I
Buy
don't have
an
an
IndyCar sponsorship.
extra $150K laying around, and if I did, I probably wouldn't go to an IndyCar. But thank you to those who make that dream of a sponsorship, getting us closer and closer. Craig DaCosta, Christy Avery, the Libertarian Coalition, Jason Doolittle, and Ed Brehab, and Memerty Libs. Thank you guys so much, and we appreciate all of your patronage and for supporting us. And we have a team meeting tomorrow night at 7:30. We're going to talk about some new things that we've got going on. So
there's a new. By the way, there's another Thrones episode next week.
What is it?
The
It's
Last
like a
Watch.
Yeah, it's like a documentary of the show.
Oh,
the
cool.
creation of it. So big fans will still watch. Same time, 9:00.
All right. All right, thanks for joining us here on this episode of We Are Libertarians. Thank you to Todd. Thank you to Jessica. Thank you to Chris Gault. And thank you to you for listening. So
Thank
we
you,
appreciate
Chris
it.
Spangle.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you to me, because I don't get thanked a lot.
You never do.
Thanks,
No.
Spangle.
I need more thanks in my life. Thank you.
Sorry,
Jessica.
thanks, dear leader.
Thank you. All right, we'll see you later. Thanks, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.